and the Masters of the Universe.
When it came to working on the second season of He-Man, it seems like the scripts got a bit more sophisticated. The directors were now starting to feel their oats a little bit more and feel a little more freedom because they had a runaway hit in He-Man. So a little bit more was expected.
The first season of Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe broke ratings records and changed the face of syndicated television with its unprecedented 65 new shows airing Monday through Friday afternoons. Before they could bask in the sunshine, however, the talented producers, writers, animators, voice actors, and crew of He-Man were given the go-ahead to start on a second season of 65 more episodes. The writing staff gained some new faces, including some future science fiction stars, while the art team flexed their drawing muscles to keep up with the dynamic new scripts. Debuting in the fall of 1984, He-Man fans were treated to all-new animated stories featuring the dazzling and dastardly denizens of Eternia. Now, you have the power to hear how your favorite He-Man stories came to be from the writers and artists who created the action-packed escapades. Join us as we explore the stories of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Part 3.
After we finished the first 65 episodes of He-Man, the first season, we transitioned into doing more episodes of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Boy, was that a switch. We went from doing He-Man, action, adventure, fantasy, science fiction to urban comedy with the Cosby Kids. And but that kept us working, and we were unprepared for the success of He-Man. It was very well received. It was a phenomenon. I believe the first year combined revenue of the TV show and the toys and all the merchandise and everything was somewhere around $500 million. There was never anything like that before and never anything since as far as TV shows were concerned. And maybe The Simpsons, after all these years, have come to equal that. But it was a phenomenon. It was just tremendous. And we got orders for an entire second season, another 65 episodes. That's 130 episodes of a show. So after Fat Albert, we went into production on season 2 of He-Man.
I came in, I believe it was the second season. It's hard to tell after so many episodes, you know, they blend in together. But it was just as She-Ra, his sister, was coming out. As we were working on He-Man, a lot of the artists had been drawing other shows like Fat Albert, which didn't really get too involved with the detailed anatomy. And we had a chance to work on that and hone it. And if you notice, from the beginning of the first season to the very last season, and even into She-Ra, the ability of the artist to draw human anatomy grew.
If the board artists did something, the directors weren't afraid of it. They were willing to push it. They were willing to do stronger layouts or more advanced camera moves. And part of that was just the competition. He-Man created a competition out there in the world of, because Lou sort of uncovered that syndicated world, now Marvel was doing it. Now Hanna-Barbera was doing syndicated. And now people, and they didn't use the stock system, so you could go to other studios and do freer work. You could draw any scenes you felt like. So the board artists at Filmation started to do more advanced stuff. You wanted to push it more, and that all led towards the quality level growing and growing and growing. I think the second season of He-Man had a significantly higher quality look than the first season did, just because of that. And that just kept growing through the rest of Filmation. It kept getting better and better and better.
They would start with saying, what's an issue that might be relevant to a child audience, and then write a story around that. That was pretty firmly established toward the end of the first year, and I didn't notice any change in that in the second year. The second year, the only thing I can say about the second year was a lot easier because the writers were writing that way. They knew what the structure and format of that show was going to be, and wrote to it. And so a lot of the things that I had done in the first 25 or 30 or 40 episodes, I no longer needed to do.
The second season, we started to, you know, after you've done 65 episodes, you're hard-pressed to come up with something you haven't done before. And I have to hand it to all the writers, and just Filmation in general, is that, you know, we kept coming up with new things and with fresh things that worked well. or revisiting things and giving a different push on it. But the biggest thing about the second season is you see a lot more villains than Skeletor. Because we had realized in the Skeletor syndrome, so we just can't do every week. You can't have a plot that, that He-Man foils, and worse when you go into syndication and you do it, as we were doing it, about 6 or 7 days a week. I say, because it becomes so apparent then that Skeletor is just so totally inept,
Teil. Mother? I feel my mother. She's alive.
In the second season, we were visiting characters that we hadn't visited so much before, and Teil was one of those characters. Her relationship with her father, her relationship to Prince Adam. They were more prevalent in the second season than they were in the first season, because again, now we were looking for new things to do. We had every big monster we could think of, and now we had such a backlog of monsters, basically, we just used stock. By that time, we had created quite a world. I also updated the Bible for the second season, and that was an important thing to do. I went back, I looked at every episode, we put together everything. I said, okay, here's villains, here's friends, here's foes, here's foes of the foes, here's friends of the friends, enemies of enemies. I had all the relationships all set out in the Bible by the second season. That hadn't been in there, that Michael had already put in at the beginning. But we had a lot of relationships then, and we had a lot of things to work with. So we could kind of pull and choose because the stuff was already there. So it worked for the stock footage way we worked. And then it was just finding out, new, different, great things about these people, and then keeping up with the moral lessons.
Larry and I functioned as story editors on the series, but we rewrote scripts and commissioned stories and everything else, so our job was that of story editors, particularly Larry, who was a very good script doctor. I must have been about 30, 31 as I watched the series, which would seem to be old to be watching cartoons, but I liked the mythology of it, and after I got onto the show and I met Larry, I found out how much of the mythology he had created and added to the show. Larry's good on universe building and world building, and he brought to the table a great knowledge about how to create a mythological environment. And I responded strongly on seeing that textural background. It wasn't just about blowing stuff up. It was about real stories and a real underlying mythology. When I first came on to the show, I'd never been on a TV series as a regular before, as a staff writer or story editor. And I was very nervous for the first 3 or 4 weeks because Larry had been there for a while. And finally, having not really spoken to Larry much before then because I was kind of sequestered, I went to his office to try and strike up a conversation. And I said, let's turn my first script in, and I'm very happy with it. And I'm very relieved because I wasn't sure if I could do this job. And Larry said, his first sentence to me, since we're coming to Filmation, I'm still not sure. And I went back to my office and sat there for the next several days, and we didn't talk, because he scared me.
Cat and the Spider is one of my favorite scripts because I wanted to do something with Cringer or Battle Cat. And what better than to give him a girlfriend? It worked out really great. The character, obviously, one of the things I like to do is I like to create my own characters.
Well, hello, big boy.
Who are you?
The name's Katrina. Oh.
Katrina was just one of my favorite characters with the morale, and she was sexy and all kinds of stuff. And, totally had Battle Cat a Twitter, really. And I thought, I gotta do that. And that one was really a D&D set because it had the old temple and the traps and the weird statues that would come out, typical sword and sorcery stuff, But the character was strong, and that's what made Cat and the Spider really fly. I mean, it was just a fun romp with, you know, again, this kind of wild lady, kind of Xena-like at that time, you know.
In the Energy Beats episode, people have commented on all the transformations that appeared on that episode. And while I can't be real specific why there were so many transformations, I think I may have a reason. We were writing these scripts in a very tight time schedule, and those sequences were already printed out. So I would just be able to retype them, and that would maybe save me about a half a day of writing. So the more transformations I could put in there, the better. It was always a wonderful point of writing a script when it had at least 2 transformations in every script. And that one I had maybe 3 or 4, and I could get the script done faster. The Energy Beats has a element in it about where it's declared to be He-Man Day. And Orko gets all involved in that. It all becomes part of the reason of that episode. And then later on, apparently around 1986, Mayor Bradley declared a certain day Masters of the Universe Day. And people have asked me, well, what did I have to do with that, or what did I think of that? Well, anybody can get a day proclaimed under their name. It could be Roby, Worst Writer of He-Man Day, if you give the city of Los Angeles enough money to pay for the proclamation. I was not only inspired by Puffin stuff when I was writing He-Man, I was also inspired by some classic writers, and in one of my episodes there was a Raven, and that was certainly inspired by Poe. For those of you who don't know Poe, just go on the internet and look up Poe, and you'll see who he was. But that Raven, which people talk about for some reason, I don't know why, I can barely remember it, but it was definitely inspired by Edgar Allan Poe.
Day of the Machines, which is also, interestingly enough, 2 years later, I did an episode of Transformers with the very same premise and the very same title. And this shows you how little I remember He-Man. Because I'm sure when I was doing that Transformers episode, I thought, Day of the Machines, great title, great idea. The machines rise up. If you think about it, it makes more sense as a Transformer than it does a He-Man.
Got to stop you, Truck.
The sooner the better. I can't control myself.
I've always liked magical characters, and too often they get to be misused as just plot solvers. And I thought, here's this person who's been living in this castle for hundreds of years potentially, and never leaves. How did she get to that position? Who was she before she took that on? We all come from somewhere, we all go somewhere. Where did she come from? And as I winnowed back that trail and expanded to her original name, Teil, I thought, here's someone who learned this skill, this power, from someone else. Who gave her that? Why did they pass it on? Again, what does she want to do? She wants to pass on her power. Who did she give it to? Teil. How far was she going to get that power and then use it? And it became a very personal story in that respect for the character. And I saw the actress not long after doing the voice track by sheer accident in the hallway. And she thanked me for that because no one had ever answered for her where this character came from and who she was. And the acting from that point onward became much more interesting for her. I'm a very obsessive-compulsive individual. Everything has to kind of fit for me in one way or the other. And I knew we were doing the She-Ra series down the road. And I thought, let's show these guys in the He-Man series a long time ago having come in, who were the bad guys in the She-Ra series. So I introduced the Horde, which was basically the alien race in the She-Ra series, in He-Man. So the Horde we see attacking during that episode of He-Man becomes a major player in She-Ra later on.
That Falcon, a good place to start. Show him what we can do.
Yes, Captain. Hey, that's not supposed to happen.
To save Skeletor, that was yeah, we wrote the episodes, one after another, and they they simply stockpiled them for future seasons.
I remember that one. That was sort of like Skeletor conjures up something he can't control, and it takes over him, and he gets in trouble. So, yeah, it's the villain biting off more than he can chew type of story, and He-Man has to kind of, pull him out of the fire in order to save everybody. And I like stories like that. They're kind of again, my reference on these was sort of classic Marvel comic stories, and every once in a while the hero and the villain have to team up in order to survive, and that's a good place to build a story out of.
That was another Trojan piece where we could use all our old, that's one of the things is you had to use those old sets back over and over again and kind of save money. So we went back there a couple of times because we didn't want to take a world and only use it once. And that was the whole reason for it. They said, well, it's about time for us to use all our old Trojan footage again, so come up with a story on that. It was fun working with Orko in Troya because he was a totally different character in Troya. On Eternia, there was not much he could do, and most of the time his magic would mess up. On Troya, he was powerful. He was very powerful. He was thought to be one of the greatest wizards there, so it was interesting to take him back to his roots and show a different Orko than the kids were used to. An Orko that really, this time, he didn't mess up. He could really do stuff.
It's not so terrible now, is it?
It probably was a case of somebody said, do something with these bird guys. We got these bird guys. We have to do something with them. You pulled the short straw. You lucky fool, you. And it had the egg of, was the egg of Avion? Is that what it's called? Yeah. That's another egg. That's like what, my second He-Man show with an egg in it? I loved eggs. You can't have enough eggs in a good action adventure show. I don't know why. I guess because it was bird guys, it made sense. But it's not really an egg. This one actually is a jewel. The other one is a jewel, looks like a jewel, but it's really an egg. This one is a jewel that looks like an egg, but it's not an egg. It's actually a jewel because I think it powers their force field or something like that, doesn't it? That's the that's the solving the mystery and helping the guy out who's in trouble, which you have to show you're a good guy, coming to the aid of people, and also I was thinking, well, what's the worst thing that can happen to a bird guy? Well, you clip his wings. So we clipped his wings, and that motivates He-Man and / Adam to help him.
Two things that sort of followed my career as far as storylines were outer space and volcanoes. And there was an episode I did called Shadow of Skeletor, which I just always was interested in outer space. So I thought a moon would be another different place. I did a circus later on, so why not another location? That was the moon. So I had a moon, and Arthur Nadell, because he always contributed to the scripts, he said, let's have a second moon. And of course, okay. And he and I sort of figured out what was the purpose of this second moon, and that was to have this conflict between these two countries. I didn't always understand what I was writing. Arthur would say, why don't you try this and do that? But I would do what Arthur said, and that's how it evolved into apparently one of the best episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So I wrote, some people consider the worst, and some people consider the very best He-Man.
Just like the Moon of Darkness.
That's right, Ram-Man. The Moon of Darkness is always positioned over Skeletor's domain.
In Shadow of Skeletor, there was a cliffhanger, I guess it was Act 1 or Act 2, where He-Man is about to reveal his secret identity, and a lot of people like that particular ending, and really was just trying to find something different to do with He-Man, and I thought, why not try that? And up to the end of that act break, at least, you think that He-Man's going to reveal his secret identity, and I just thought it was an interesting thing to do. And I went as far as I could, and of course, he didn't reveal his identity, as it always works out.
Yes. By the way, Tila, remind me to show you my great new jacket when we get back home.
Some of the shows, some of the He-Man episodes featured things you could stretch your muscles a bit more on, that you could be a little more comedic with. He-Man is a relatively straight character. You can't have him doing bug-eyed takes. So everybody always wanted a good cringer show, or a good show that featured one of the more cartoony characters. And some of the villains were very cartoony. And this one show, Frady Cat in particular, it offered an opportunity to really do something comedic. And we had like new animators that would always come to the board guys and say, can you put something in the show that we can do something with? Because they knew it would come to them, because they would go to the directors in turn and say, give me a hard scene, give me one that I can really animate. And so the challenge became in those shows, like, okay, do something that has to be animated, but give it a starting point. For example, it could be Cringer walking in, which they could use a stock, and then for like 2 feet, it could go into this brand new action. It's very funny. And then he could run off in his stock, so they could work in and out of it. They could make their footage, the show could make budget, but all of a sudden you had this neat little thing that happened. And so that show lent itself particularly to that kind of thing.
Everybody swim!
I hate water! I can't swim!
But you can float!
Hey! I can float! Help! I'm getting wet!
The Rainbow Warrior was done by was written by a storyboard artist who had moved into writing, and it's a very well done script. And Bob was already like working on his first novel, and it was kind of interesting to see a double threat like that, a guy who can storyboard and write as well, and it actually kind of worked into more of a modern thinking about television production, where there's a lot of writing involved in the storyboarding.
Bob was very excited because it was his first show that he was getting done. There was a sort of that nervous energy of it being his first produced script, and he was like an expectant father running back and forth and looking over my shoulder and like, how's it turning out? And it was kind of it was kind of fun helping him get his first show to to the delivery room.
Oh, who are you? And where on earth am I?
I know not of Earth. I am Randor, King of Eternia.
Eternia?
You need rest. Return with me to my palace. You shall be my guest while you recover.
But
I think you will find it comfortable and pleasant. In a few days, you will be well and can return to your Earth.
Bob said he deliberately wanted to make a story about Queen Marlena because she was the most underused character in the entire show. Like, there's never anything happens to Queen Marlena. She just kind of stands there, like a first lady, and just smiles. Just no reaction. She never does anything. King Randor seemed to do more than Queen Marlena. So Bob was like, let's do a show just about Queen Marlena. Like, let's give her an entire backstory, that she was once this very energetic warrior princess thing, or space. I think she was an astronaut, in that show.
One of the things was, as we used to try to cut back on, again, like not wishing to spend too much money. I mean, digitally now, you can like build, soldiers, and you could just multiply them in infinity. So you could have 20,000 soldiers running around. Back then, you had to draw them all by hand. And we used to joke around about King Randor would say, call out my royal guard. And you knew the royal guard was going to be 3 guys going, and 2 guys were Xeroxes of the first guy. So all 3 of them would go. And you would just try and alternate the exposure a little bit so they didn't look like cookie cutter. We just didn't have the budget to do a huge group like that, And we were always arguing, with the writing department. I'd go to Arthur and I'd say, Arthur, if you write the evil enemy battle fleet, spins out into the supernova, we got a really expensive show. If you do He-Man and Skeletor handcuffed at the ankle, dropped in the desert, you're gonna have a really cheap show. So can't we do some psychological dramas, And Arthur would go, that's very funny, Tom. Meaning, like, go do your work and shut up. So.
I wanted to have a character introduced in tells my middle name, which would be as annoying to him as he was to us, and someone who was a mischievous imp and would give us a chance to really play with the characters, and again, in a humorous episode.
Not his fault, no, But nothing would have gotten out of hand if you hadn't been playing jokes in the first place, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Then let's not have any jokes inside the temple, all right?
The voice of the attack track, I must say, does not quite convey the humor that I had been hoping for. But then when you ask for a truck to do humor, it's not always the smartest thing in the world to do. But that having been said, it's a fun episode. Journey to Stone City was probably one of my first episodes for He-Man. And I always try and think of the obvious point. And the obvious point when you have an animated series where it costs a lot of money to animate things, you think, maybe they should go to a city where everyone's made of stone. Therefore, they don't have to animate anything, which is my pitch to Arthur. It'll be cheap, Arthur. You have to animate anything. It's going to be great. Well, they're stone, and they stand around a lot.
Oh, who cares about statues? Where's the treasure?
It was really just more of a straight-ahead adventure story, written around a concept more than anything else, and also brought in the mythology of those who had been fighting the good battle centuries before. And we get a sense from them that this saga of the good versus evil struggle, particularly as embodied on Eternia, has been ongoing for a very, very, very long time. And it's very hard to find parking there now.
When I saw my script animated on the screen, I was delighted. I told everybody, because I knew what the date was going to be. Actually, it was sometime in November. And I involved the whole family, and you just sit there with a big smile on your face. That's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Well, I've always been a big fan of time travel, and the idea that there were kings in earlier Eternia, of course, I thought was an interesting idea, and what would happen if one of them was brought forward and had to deal with things as they are now. And so the time wheel it just drew out of my interest in time travel and my interest in the idea that there were other kings. Because, if you have King Randor, there's got to be earlier kings. And I thought, well, what would that earlier king be like and what would he be doing? And obviously he was a lot more warlike than Randor was. I didn't run into any problems making Tamusk more violent anyway. That's just the way he was. It's what came out of his mouth. Generally, the dialogue that I write for any character grows out of who they are. And so I knew who he was. I knew who this old ancient king was. I knew he was kind of a violent guy because that's the kind of life he lived in. And he had that club which he could do magic with. So there was not really a problem coming up with things for him to say. Now, there were moments when he was too violent. He'd talk about blood and guts and wars and battles and things, and I had to kind of bring myself back a little bit. Once again, dealing with He-Man, you could do a lot of property damage, but not much in the way of actual violence against people and things.
I should have known.
Randor! We are not yet finished, pretender. This warrior of yours is strong, but I will defeat him yet. And then I will defeat you.
When somebody says He-Man to me, I think of all the wonderful people that were involved in creating it. It was really a wonderful, wonderful time to be involved in animation. He-Man was a brand new adventure. It was, before He-Man, everything was on Saturday morning. There were no other outlets. And then Lou carved out the syndicated market Monday through Friday after school or before school, whatever the local stations wanted to do. It was 5 days a week. That's a lot of shows. And Filmation was just a wonderful place to work, not just He-Man, but everything. Because of Lou, because of Arthur, Robbie, Paul Dini, Larry DiTilio, the parade of freelancers who came through. I can't even begin to imagine how many people did scripts from the 130, and it's a lot of scripts.
When you come right down to it, there's only one thing others can expect of us, and that we can expect of ourselves: to do our best See you next time.
I'm a very fast writer. I tend to think about the show for a long period of time on the theory of measure twice, cut once. So when I get down to typing the actual script up, I just go straight through it. I type 120 words a minute, so that as a result I can do a script in a couple of days. I think one day, on one episode, I can't recall which one it was now, I wrote the whole thing in one day. Larry and I had this competition at the time to see who could write a script faster. And his record, I think, had been 2 days at that point. So I said, coming in, I'm writing my next script all today. And this was before computers. This was on IBM Selectric, where my speed goes down a little bit. And he kept trying to distract me over the course. Want some coffee? Want a donut? No, I'm writing my episode. And by 5:30 that day, I was done with the script.
Roby Gorin worked for us for a while. I don't know if you're going to be talking to Roby, but that ought to give you a lot of laughs. Roby could figure out a way to sleep in his office, all kinds of ways to sleep in his office without anybody knowing. He was something. And he'd still get his pages done every day. And when he got his pages done, then he'd go to sleep.
Roby liked to take naps. He would take a little power nap, and he would just, push his chair back and lay down and try to hide behind his desk. But the desk not being as long as he was, his legs would stick out. So Arthur, I think, came by one day and saw him in there, and the end. No more naps. No more power naps for Roby.